Hello, friends. Welcome back to Reiki Crossroads and Connections. My name is Michaela of Heartscapes. I'm really glad to have you here. This ongoing YouTube series is an exploration of practices and ways of life and mindsets that help us to live lives that are grounded, that are spacious, that are connected, and that to help us remember ourselves. And we're doing this through conversations with a Reiki teacher and folks who are working in a wide range of modalities in the arts, in healing spaces, in farming spaces, in spaces that have to do with the seen and unseen ways that we navigate our lives and our relationships. And today we're going to settle into the realm of relationships with our guest, Halley Miglietta. So we're going to welcome her on in. Welcome, Halley.
Hello, so happy to be here.
So, Hallie and I have gotten to learn and teach and journey together for quite a number of years. And we've really kind of watched each other's businesses and work and passion and focus in the world kind of grow up over these years. I don't know if you feel that way, but I definitely feel like we've gotten to observe, the evolution of what we now bring into this world. And, it's always such a delicious thing to see the ways in which, the people who are in my life have these similar touch points to me in terms of what we care about, how we go about doing our work, where our passions focus and rest in terms of how they express themselves in the world, and then also have these really unique and different and creative ways in which they are not the same from each other. And so we'll get to explore a little bit of that today. And first, of course, I want to introduce you to the folks watching at home. And we like to do that with just a little brief bio of our friends who've joined us here today. So Halley Inez Miglietta supports people in their authenticity through readings, through writing, through fashion, and through space holding. She's particularly drawn to the transformational properties of love and relationships. And you're doing that through your kind of dual sides of your business, Love School and Pony Apparel. And I am really excited to dive into both of those spaces. And where I'd love for us to begin is just simply with the question, how are you doing today? How are we both stepping into this space? So Hallie, how are you?
Thank you. I feel really good. I have made some shifts. I mean, it's constant shifting, constant refinement in how to do this work, and how to express it. And I'm definitely in, you used this terminology the other day when we were talking, which I loved, the like bones, like I'm really in a bones phase where I'm building new structures. So
Yeah.
that the bones phase of a business is like this infinite to-do list that never seems to quite, like, you're like, okay, I made progress today, and then it's just like, oh, there's so much to do. So holding that without allowing it to overwhelm is what I'm working on right now, like letting the to-do list be big, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I totally relate to that. And to continue the metaphor of, our body, our businesses as a body, right? Our businesses as an entity that we're in relationship with. I feel like I am in kind of a flesh phase, right? That having laid a lot of bones, not that there aren't more bones, there's always more bones to build. It's an ever growing creature. But having laid a lot of foundation over the past couple of years, I'm able to bring some flesh, some decoration, some contour to different aspects, and it's an exciting period because it involves a lot of drawing on curriculum and ideas and offerings that have existed for a long time as part of those bones, and then kind of really refining them and bringing them forward in new ways, but in ways that are already supported because those bones are there. And so I'm still feeling a lot of energy and creativity around that. You and I have talked a lot about cycles of energy. And I have what I often call my lion cycles, where there's like a burst of energy, you know, a lot of motivation, inspiration, energy to get things done. And then these like long periods of rest. Um, and it's like when I'm in one of those rest phases, I have to just like, I'm learning how to continue to move things forward, but to do that in a gentle way, in a way that's leading with kind of visioning work and being still and being in self care and all of that. Those things don't always well align with what actually has to get done. Yeah. And they are aligning well this time. And of course, seasonally, you know, this time of year, the fall is very much a like production energy time of year. So it feels good to like have that alignment happening. I'd love to be able to go into the rest of winter, just like, yeah, I get to rest because my past self did me a solid, got things done. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm feeling that. It's still feeling that energy. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, can I speak to something that's just coming up right now? So I find it really interesting to create businesses out of our passions, right? And we've talked a lot about this because the actual work, like the real work that I am here to share and give and deliver to the world and create space for, is such a small, it's like I have to do all of this like structural, organizational, functional, technical stuff to get to this part, which is like the part that I'm just like, oh, I'm just want to be right in that part, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and it's an interesting, I will, like, for lack of a better word, like rude awakening about when you turn your passions into a business.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
any solopreneur out there right now is like, yep, uh-huh, yep. Because all of a sudden you're the CEO, you're the marketing department, you know, you're the sales department, you're the operations person, right? You're the janitor, you know, you're all of the things, and you're the space holder and the facilitator of magic. Right,
Yeah,
which is the
exactly.
mission, right? And so, yeah, you know, I have this conversation a lot with folks. It seems like most of the people that I'm in relationship with right now, in community with, you know, have some form of solopreneurship going on, whether it's a side hustle or their main thing. So, you know, it definitely is a mixed blessing. And the more prepared you can be, which I was not when I started my business, sure wasn't. Um, that you will be holding those multiple hats until and unless and you know you get to the point where you've got enough success and inclination to bring on a team to help. But you know, that process of building our relationship with our business, which is the same as saying our relationship with our passion and the vehicle through which that passion enters the world and impacts the world beyond our kind of day-to-day life, which it certainly is already doing, is a really powerful experience. And you know, focusing on that idea of relationship, I think really kind of lands us, you know, at the beginning of the conversation that we want to have today. Um, because your work has always been centered on relationship. Firstly, relationship with ourselves, relationship with the world, and from that, as an extension of that, relationship with others. And I'd love kind of by way of working our way to the specifics of how you offer this work to others, which we will absolutely get to. I'd love to first start with a little bit of the story. I always talk with folks about the threads that they follow into the moment that they're in. Right. So we have all of the experiences of our life that, you know, happened throughout the years. And then there's these threads that thread through our life that lead us to different moments, and a particular group of those threads that have to do with the subject at hand, you know, get woven together into the thing. So Hallie, I'd love for you to tell us just whatever has most heart and meaning for you in this moment about any of the threads that you followed to do the work that you're doing.
It so is like such a breadcrumb journey, you know, where you really are just like following these little clues about your path. It's so fascinating to think about and to share about. So I would say that there have been several threads that I've followed. For a while, it was very like expressive arts healing. That was a strong thread. And then also like oracles and divination and accessing contact with the divine through tangible tools. That was a strong thread, and really following, and then I kind of merged those threads, and so I was really offering readings and coaching and expressive arts exploration um, as my work for a long time. And then there's these like systems that I really follow, like human design and numerology and astrology. That's a very strong thread in my work and in my the way that I think and how I interpret reality, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and all along, the most vulnerable thread that I've been doing kind of behind the scenes is like the love and attachment work, which comes from my own personal journey of, like losing my parents at a young age and having attachment wounding that prevented me from having like really like close, sustainable, intimate, romantic relationships. And as someone who wanted that, like most people do, I really took it upon myself to like do the deep work on that. But it was kind of like my thing that I did with myself, and with my friends and the people that I was the closest to. And then in my sessions with other people, like obviously relationships is just like it's like work, like purpose and relationships is the majority of what I would work with people on. And so it just became this topic that I was just focusing on a lot with other people. And so it got to the point where I felt like I had done enough of my own work and I had supported enough people in their work that I was ready to kind of like niche a bit in the love realm. Um, and so that really happened because I got a download of these 7 pillars of liberated love. And it was like, ooh, these are strong, they're important, they're meaningful, they're easy. Not easy. They're simple but hard.
That's
But
my mantra, simple but not easy. I think the
yeah,
most powerful, effective, long-lasting systems of transformation are all simple but not easy.
yeah,
A lot, the ones that I have followed.
completely simple but not easy. And this has happened to me a couple times in my life where I just get these like very clear, these things come through, and I'm like, okay, now I'm responsible for them. Like it's like they came to me, I have to now like write about them or create around them or find a way to get them into the world. And so the 7 pillars came through. I was writing about them, and then it became a book, and then I kind of built Love School around this creation, I would say, because it needed a container to hold it. And so so then I built the container of Love School, which is like the website and the Instagram and all of that. And writing is a very big part. It's another thread. It's a very strong thread for me. And so writing is how I process and understand my own lessons on the journey. And so I'm doing that on Instagram very regularly. And so, yeah, those are the creations. And then I created a session called a love assessment, which is basically like looking at someone's love and relationship placements from multiple different perspectives in regards to their charts. So this is, my chart thread. So we look at the astrology, we look at the human design, we look at the numerology, and then I'm pulling like key things about how this person loves uniquely and what they potentially need in a romantic situation, because so much of my work is about deconditioning from what we've been taught, so that we can be the authentic expression of who we actually are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love hearing the like the overview, the flow of this story, kind of a new in this conversation, having, you know, been your friend and colleague during most of that time. And, there's this couple of things that stood out to me. So firstly, that for you, and I think as you said it, your focus is so often on the tangible, like the tools, the objects. You made this incredible Oracle system that uses wooden chips and this beautiful luxurious velvet bag, and then you wrote your book that has the most incredible illustrations. Like you're very oriented towards beauty and towards the senses. You want things to feel good and to look beautiful and to smell nice, and it's like this sensory experience, but it's not random. It's being funneled through this vision. And then once you had those tangible, beautiful representations of that vision, you're like, now it needs the container that's going to hold it so that it can be coherent, it can be communicated to other people, it can be facilitated in the world of, transactions and whatever all has to happen. Even if we're not talking about a for-profit business, there has to be a container for there to be giving and sharing and, expansion, or else it's really just kind of our own thing. And I'm struck by that approach, right? That you had this beautiful reception of this vision, this piece of wisdom, right? This organizational principle around some deep inner truths that, I'm sure have some universality to it and also some specificity to your own journey, to the people that you'd worked with and observed. And this like representation of these truths that came through in the form of these pillars of love. And then, okay, they need a container to hold them. So there's a book, there's a reading, there's a type of session, there's online self-paced, work that people can follow. Now there has to be a website, there has to be marketing through Instagram. And yeah, I just love seeing the flow of that, of like building a body of work in that organic way that has a lot of coherence, but that sometimes on the outside, probably, maybe even to you, but perhaps to others, possibly looked a little bit random, right? Like, oh, you're doing an oracle. Oh, you're doing a book. Oh, you've got a thing. You've got a this. Like, what's all the things, right? And like for you, you're like, no, it's coherent, right? Like it needs to like come together, and then it'll get presented in a way that feels coherent. And I really resonate with that. But one of the things that I really appreciate is that you waited until you had gotten to a certain point in your own internal work with these systems around your own core things, right? That you're like, I think you said, I'd gotten to a certain point in my own work that I felt like I could share it.
Mhm.
And, I chuckle at that because I definitely jumped into like offering Reiki before I had properly applied it to my own healing journey, and, had a lot of missteps and a lot of like delays and a lot of like, I don't actually understand what this is. I think it's one thing, but ultimately it becomes another. And so, I got to a good coherent place, but I'm just appreciating the organic nature of like, okay, this piece is here. Cool, let's bring this piece, let's bring this piece, and then let's take a step back and say, okay, here's the organism that's being birthed, and now let's put a container around it and offer it. So yeah, that's a really beautiful process.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for that reflection. I will say though, there's definitely I definitely started the love school work before I was where I wanted to be in my own personal journey with love. Like I kind of was like, I remember writing this book, and like writing the book was helping me transform inside of myself, right? It was like part of my process. So it wasn't like, okay, I've had my process and now I can write this book. It was like the book was helping me have my own process.
Yeah.
And I remember being at the point where it was time to put it into the world and feeling like, am I am I like the embodiment of this teaching yet? Like enough yet to actually put this into the world? And it was kind of like a leap of faith of like, maybe not, but it still feels valuable, and it still feels like the way that I do my own work is through creating work, which is like it's a very interesting thing because you're just like, it's like imposter syndrome is a constant grappling when that's your approach, when you're like, I'm not an expert yet, but like, here's the teaching, which, and the teaching feels very clear and pure. And I always have to trust that, like that the teaching is clear, even if I'm still like very much in process personally.
This is such an important point, and it's an important thing for folks to consider from both sides of things, right? As a person who might go to a practitioner, such as yourself, such as myself, and as a person who might be a practitioner, such as us, this idea of when am I ready to share the teachings that I have been applying to my own self, right? And in the kind of work that we do, there's not a solid line, right?
Yeah.
Like many professions, there's credentialing, right? You go to school, you go to a program, you do an apprenticeship, you do an internship, you get whatever credits you need to get. Somebody signs off on it and says, yes, you have done all the things, you have enough knowledge and experience, you can now go do the thing. Now you might be at the very beginning and no, you still need to build experience, but there's a certain like starting line, like, yep, you have the green light, you can go. But one of the things that I'm really realizing is that there's so many professions that do not have that clear green light. And it is our own internal assessment and integrity to say, when do we begin? And for anybody who's kind of grappling with that, because I mean, this is a conversation I have over and over again, and that shows up in so many different spaces, from Reiki communities to my business coaching community to artists who are trying to sell their stuff. It's something that comes up a lot. When am I credentialed enough, when there's not an official credential, to say I can teach this to other people in a meaningful way with integrity? And one of the things that I go back to a lot is this quote from Anne Lamott, who's one of my favorite authors and just such a quirky, brilliant, weird mystic of our time. And the quote is something like, we think we have to get it all together before we show up, but sometimes we can't get it together until we show up.
Exactly.
Yeah, and which, feels like what you're like, I had to write the book as my process. And then I got to the end of the book and then I assess, okay, given where I am in my process and given what just came out of me, is this ready to go into the world?
Mhm.
At that point, we have our own discernment, we have our own integrity, our own values, and, input from other people that we trust. But the idea that we have to have it all together and all figured out, we have to be all healed and perfect before we can offer some value around the things we've been working on it's a fallacy. It's rooted in a perfectionist mindset that is not that doesn't really reflect how we operate as people, and is actually part of a kind of a colonial white supremacist sort of framework of idea that you have to be the absolute professional at the top before you can offer service. Now, on the other side of things, there's times when we're not ready and we go out and we say, hi, I can teach this thing. We're not ready, right?
Yeah.
We actually don't have it yet. But oftentimes, if we're even asking ourselves the question, it's a sign that we're kind of on the right track. And, if we can have integrity and transparency with people, I mean, I tell people all the time, like, here's this principle that I'm going to teach you in Reiki, and here's where I totally failed at it 2 weeks ago. Here's where I am 100% working on this and like failing a lot, but also here's some success. And also I really, really trust it. And I really believe in it. So yeah, I love that piece. I think that's a really important.
Yeah, I have this memory coming up that I want to share, which was a big trust building moment with myself as a practitioner. This was before pre-love school. I was doing readings and coaching, and I was brokenhearted. And there was a person that I was just like just like perpetually distraught about, and like having to grieve very, very constantly. I was like so in my transformation journey with that person. And I feel like that relationship dynamic was the precursor to love school, in a lot of ways. But I was like really in the underworld part of it. And I remember this one morning and I was just like just like sobbing, 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 sobbing with grief the whole morning. And I had a client come in at like whatever 10. And so my client's on the way, and like minutes before she arrived, I just had to like pull it together, and just like pull it together, like park your grief and be of service to this person. And I totally did, and I totally held space for her heartbreak, and I didn't bring my stuff, and I just felt like I just remember after the session being like, whoa, I feel like I just like graduated to like, I don't have to be perfect to be a healer, and I can still be a super effective practitioner when I'm having my own human experience of like heartbreak and pain. So yeah.
And what kind of, delusion do we need to be carrying if we believe that we actually are going to get to the place where we're done healing,
Right.
fixed, and we're all put back together and it's never going to break again, right?
Yeah.
It's not reality. We're not
No.
we're not living a life in a complicated world and a vulnerable body and a tender heart and a mind that can get so jacked up with all of it if that is so, right? And can we own that? Can we know that and do just what you just described, right? Allow ourselves to be in our humanity and have enough grounding and enough spaciousness in our heart and enough connection to the people that we're working with that we can set it down when we need to,
Yeah.
right? And let that be part of the bones that helps us to create a container for other people, right? That connection of empathy and to be able to, and then also the integrity to, cancel an appointment if we really can't do it, because that happens sometimes.
Yeah, that happens too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that really, kind of circles around to this idea of practices that help us to live a life that is grounded, that's spacious, and that's connected, and that helps us to remember ourselves. And so, there's all of these, again, pieces that you bring to the table, literally, that you bring to the table: the book, the oracle, the other oracle cards that you've been working with before, systems like human design and astrology, and then inside of all of it, or perhaps actually literally the bones of all of it, are these pillars, right? And that being the thing that all of it kind of circles around, including what we haven't gotten to quite yet, which is the pony apparel branch of things. And so I'd love to just invite you to talk a little bit about the pillars of love, whether you want to name some of them or just however you want to kind of welcome us into the cathedral that is created by these pillars, so that people can get a sense of what they are.
Yeah, I'll just say them. So the first one is be your safest space, which is really like it's the foundational pillar. It's the base, right? And it's one that I literally have to remind myself of this pillar like almost every day. I have to remember, like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, I am my safe space. Like, this is my responsibility to myself. So it's so huge, and it seems like all of these pillars, they have really short names, and they can be really just like washed over easily until you really sink into the implications of like being your safest space in this whole world.
Not easy.
Yeah. So that's the first one. The second one is stay in today. So this is the presence pillar. um It was first called, before it was called Stay in Today, it was called No Problems in the Present, which was a way to kind of like reorient yourself to like, okay, in this very moment, it's so easy to see like everything I'm tripping on is just like not about what's happening in this very moment. I'm like a huge Eckhart Tolle fan, listener, reader. So he's helped me a lot on my journey. But stay in today is really about like, if we want to enjoy the life that we're living, then we have to be in our day, and that's like, it's hard. It's one of those things, simple, not easy. The third pillar is slow, baby, slow.
Mhm.
And that's like a very deep deconditioning in this very fast paced world. that's just getting faster and faster and faster. And the pressure of that speed is very disorienting to these human bodies, and these nervous systems. And we bring that speed, we often are bringing that speed into everything that we're doing, including our relationships, which can create a lot of like wobbly energy in a relationship if you're going faster than the foundation can hold. Yeah, so slow, baby, slow. The fourth pillar is, what is the fourth pillar? Fear, save space. Oh, do you, boo? Do you, boo? And that's just like a reminder to like follow your joy, and do the things for yourself that really like and let me just say that this book was particularly written for people that tend toward an anxious attachment style. And so this is a way to like anchor you back into yourself. And one of the things that happens when you're anxious attachment prone is you're just fully consumed about the other. Like, what are they doing? And who do I need to be more appealing to them, right? There's this like chameleon thing. And so do you, boo, is like, wait a minute, like, wait, what do you want to do for you that's going to feel good?
Yep.
The fifth pillar is align with the divine. And that one is just really about like what helps you connect, to spirit and something greater than yourself, because we're not in this alone and we're fully supported and protected. And whatever your beliefs or rituals or practices are that help you remember that, like, do that. The sixth pillar is give from your highest. And I really love this pillar. This is one that I think is really important, because when you're a good giver, when you know how to read people really well, and you have an empathic nature, and you also have attachment style that makes you feel like you need that other person to help you feel safe, what can happen is that you're giving to someone with the intention of like getting a need met.
Yeah.
And so it's like, which is a manipulation, but it's something that I think happens really unconsciously. You're like, okay, well, let me like bring this person lunch because I want to see them and I want to make sure that they still like me. And so that pillar is all about like, just don't give to get anything. If any of your giving comes from a place of needing to get something in return, then it's like, it's offbeat, and it's not, it's probably going to have a more like pushing away effect than a bringing in effect. And then the seventh pillar is get clear with the mirror. And that's the classic, like, relationships are here to be our clearest mirror, both in terms of why we're so attracted to someone. There's like information there about our own aspects that we're either not seeing or haven't activated yet, right? So there's like a dormant aspect of ourselves that we're like, oh, that person is like so confident in the world, that's so attractive. And it's like, oh, wait a minute, it's because there's like a confidence in me that wants to be birthed, as an example. And then also the shadow aspects, right? When we're like, oh my God, the person and what they're doing is driving me crazy. Like, there's some information about our own selves in there too, likely.
Yeah.
And so it's just to remember that, like, to always bring it back into self-reflection,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would imagine that. So I'm feeling a lot of symmetry with the Reiki precepts, which are the 5 precepts that give us both an invitation on how to practice the system of Reiki and how to understand our life through that lens, and also that describe the outcome we can expect if we practice the system of Reiki or other practices that have, similar foundations. And with the Reiki precepts, as with these pillars of love, there's this aspect of them being really alive and dynamic. And it's not a linear thing where, like, okay, you start at one, you work your way through the seven, and then you're done, right? That I would imagine, at least, that it's the sort of thing where we might come to it on a given day and say, what's alive for me today, right? Where do I feel really strong and really like, yeah, I'm really alive in that pillar? And where do I feel like I'm really challenged, right? Like today, I am really having a hard time being my own mirror. Um, but maybe I feel more confident in some of these other spaces. So do you find that to be true, that people are kind of dynamically, or you yourself or others that you work with them in a dynamic way that's really day by day?
Oh yeah. I mean, definitely. Like there will be days where and it's I'm so grateful that these pillars are inside of me because every single day I have to reach for one. Like there's one where I'm like, okay, wait a minute, go do you, boo. Like seriously, just go do you, boo. And it really is different all the time. When I first launched the book, actually before it was a physical book, when it was just an ebook, I ran a course. So I created this whole beautiful curriculum that I really want to do again, once I'm ready to like figure out how to sell a course, which is just really stresses me out. But I did a beta group where I kind of invited key people to come do this course with me. And at the very end, I asked, one of the last questions was, which of these pillars is easy for you? Which one can you kind of depend on and lean on? And it's the one that like, when all else fails, you align with the divine, or whatever. And then which one is your like biggest growth edge? Um, and it was so cool to hear everyone had a different combination.
Yeah.
So yeah, very dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. Another symmetry that I'm seeing, I love that you use the imagery and the metaphor of pillars, right? Because pillars are a foundation, they're bones, right? They're what hold up something, right? And so when I think about what's the something that's being held up, the language I would put to it is, as I've said, a life that is grounded, that is spacious, that's connected, and wherein we remember ourselves. I wonder what language you would put to it. What are these pillars holding up?
That's great. I mean, when you first told me those three things, the grounded, spacious, and connected, I remember literally we were talking on the phone. I remember exactly where I was standing outside. I was on a walk because they hit me powerfully. Like, oh yeah, that's it. Like that's what we want to be day in and day out. That's how we want to feel. And so I just want to say how much you've really summed it up with those three words. Let me see, what would I say that it's holding up? I mean, it's interesting. As I've been doing this work on love and on relationships and on like these dynamics between self and another, whenever I'm writing about it, and right now I'm creating this year-long membership journey, and every month has a different theme, and the themes are so beautiful, and it's been so fun to just dive into them and explore them. Um, what comes of them when I'm writing about them is it's about the self relationship. It's about self intimacy. It's about feeling connected to the self, and that being the foundation, that being the bones of all of our other relationships, being functional, and fulfilling. And so, yeah, I would say the bones or the pillars is it's really holding up like a really genuine intimacy with self.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that piece around, really developing that intimate relationship with self for its own good, for itself, and so that we can turn towards others with the kind of solidity and sovereignty and strength and openness and vulnerability that is necessary for functional, healthy, beautiful love relationships in whatever form they take. Um, and again, here is another place of symmetry with the perspectives of the system of Reiki, which comes through Japanese Buddhism and through Shinto, and concepts like non-duality and interconnection being so central to those traditions, and the idea that we often see ourselves as separate from others, and that we often see things in dualistic terms. Things are either good or bad, they're this or that, they're separate. And then, we have to make efforts to make those connections. And, just kind of listening to what you're saying through the lens of Reiki, I'm hearing the non-dualistic, but also kind of paradoxical idea that we turn in here and we get real clean and clear in this pillar, this space. And in doing that, the reflection of ourselves out to others then becomes clean and clear, and less of a need for that stratification, and that dualistic view with other people. And so interconnection becomes comfortable and maybe exciting, as opposed to something that can be really anxiety producing.
Yeah.
The idea of connecting with other people. The other thing that felt really, that kind of obvious parallel, in other realms, well, related realms of work, is the pillars of joy that are presented in the Book of Joy. And again, using the metaphor of pillars, the seven pillars of joy that are presented in that book have a lot of resonance with the pillars of love, and to a similar end, right? To create a structure in our life that is holding up a capacity to access joyfulness no matter what's happening around us. The idea that joy is an inherent condition that does not depend on what's happening to us, and that we can find it, we can be in touch with it, we can use it as a resource and a source of nourishment no matter what's going on in our life, as opposed to happiness that is dependent on conditions. And I'm feeling this resonance, right, between this idea of that self-intimacy as being an inherent condition, right, a birthright that we are born with, and then we oftentimes forget or get disconnected from, or it gets buried over because of life and challenges. And that this work is a process of remembering that inherent self-love that we're born with. And that's our birthright, and that's inherent, but that is so commonly lost track of, particularly in our modern life when we're so distracted. And that, kind of core of safety, can be dismantled so easily. So yeah, so I love seeing the symmetry with other systems that have been profoundly meaningful to me, and the ways in which these systems can work together. Right, the pillars of joy, the pillars of love. Right, a perspective through Reiki that brings us to this place of non-dualistic interconnection. That these can be a tapestry of practices that help us to live our life, and that by being in relationship with these practices and perspectives, and really understanding where they came from, how they came to be, can create a really dynamic set of resources for us. So.
For sure. And I just want to say something about what you were speaking to about the birthright versus what happens to us, as we go along. I was just reflecting about this morning, where like the autopilot mode is it's like a fear-based setting is what I'm finding. And all of my work comes from investigating my own self. It's just like I'm a student of what's happening inside of me, and therefore I am learning about what it means to be a human, But I noticed that the autopilot mode is fear-based. And so this, like, to have a self-intimacy, to choose that, to go for a pillar, to go for a pillar of joy, to go for a precept of Reiki, is the consciousness journey. Like, you have to wake up, and you have to make a conscious choice, and you have to make a conscious implementation. And so it's like the consciousness journey,
Yeah. I want to turn in a moment to Pony, and to the way in which your affinity for fashion and self-expression and the beauty, the tactile and beautiful nature of that, also plays into this work. But there's just one other place of symmetry that just really stood out as you're talking, and I mentioned it briefly earlier. But I don't know, it just feels alive to mention, which is the ways in which I see these pillars of love that you're describing being in direct opposition to what has been identified as white supremacy culture and the characteristics of that culture. And so I just pulled up um, this work that was done in that realm, that a lot of people draw on to just kind of help understand, kind of pull the veil back from what that means, because we're so steeped in it. It is so part of our culture, the air we breathe, the water we swim in, that it's really hard to see it, right? Because the dominant culture is what just feels normal, and like, of course, this is just the way it is, right? But it's not just the way it is in all places and in all times. And so there's just, some of these that just, the pillars as you just described them, to me, along with all of the amazing things it's doing for ourselves, is an antidote to white supremacist culture. And so I just wanted to name some of these.
Yeah.
So either or thinking, right? Duality.
Mm.
It's either this or it's that. It's you, it's me, it's us or them, right? Some of the pillars, as you described it, gets us into that softening, that place of connection. Individualism versus interconnection and collectivism. A sense of urgency, right? So slow, baby, slow, right? Slow it down. The right to comfort, right? The belief that we have the right to be comfortable all the time. Working with the pillars of love can be really uncomfortable.
Oh.
Right? And working with the system of Reiki gives us a greater capacity to be with discomfort without running away or trying to change the conditions that are making us uncomfortable before we've, done what we need to do with them.
Can I say something really quick about this? The pillars all exist because it is they're rooted in being uncomfortable. Like you don't need the pillars unless you're uncomfortable,
Right.
which is why, and like learning how to be your safest space is very uncomfortable at first until you find your groove. Okay, continue.
And being our safest space allows us to go into situations that are uncomfortable and still be
Yeah.
okay, right? It's
Yeah.
that center of okayness that allows me to say, okay, where might I be causing harm in the world? And let me take a look at that. Golly, that's uncomfortable, right? But I can do that because I'm still my safest space, right? Let me take accountability for things that I have caused harm around, or let me step into a position of advocacy, or saying no to something when I really would rather just be quiet, right? Like, right? It's like it's like that very first pillar gives us our own container to do the work, not only of self-love, not only of romantic relationships, but of relationship within our human species that involves righting a lot of wrongs. So yeah, I love that. The idea of power hoarding, right? So that there should be people on top that have power and everybody else should not have power and should defer to them. Like I feel the way in which the pillars of love are an antidote to that. I have fewer words for it, but like this idea of like softening the grip of attachment to needing to control everything feels present in there. I don't know, does that feel true?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Um, and then a preference for open conflict, as opposed to being able to be in challenging conversations with people from a place of love and compassion, but also integrity and strength. And then finally, the one I think I mentioned before, which is perfectionism. And so the idea that we can and should be perfect, and that we can judge others if they are not.
Mm.
Right. And judge them not on the outcomes of whatever has been said or done, but just on the fact that you are not perfect. And even like the idea of, and again, holding our own integrity and how we present something out into the world, but the idea of kind of building the ship while we're sailing it, right? Like I have this idea, I'm gonna start creating the structure for it. I'm going to start sharing it in certain ways that allow me to test it, to work with it, and I don't fully understand it yet, but I'm gonna bring it in responsible ways out into the world, is a very anti-perfectionistic way of working. I have a bias because that's absolutely my natural way of working. And again, it requires a lot of like self-responsibility, because I have definitely put things out in the world that were not ready because I was like, just do it, you know. But that's, you know, what I've observed and what I hear from you is that that was done with much care. So I love it. So, in addition to all of this, right, alongside of all of this, you started a clothing company.
Mhm.
And I know there's a lot that could be said about that, you know, about the impulse to do something tactile, to try retail out as a thing. Is this something you like? You know, finding your way inside of that. Um, and you know, again, the desire to be working with the tactile, with clothing, with self-expression in that way. So if there's anything that you want to say about that piece, and then the way in which you see Pony Apparel ultimately holding space inside of this cathedral of the Pillars of Love in the realm of self-expression. So
Mm.
just any piece of that that feels alive that you're ready to share.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Well, I would say that my main method for how I've lived my life, um, well, there are two methods, but they're very related. One is just the intuitive method of like I feel. It's like a very feeling based path that I've been on. And then the other method is like when something won't let you ignore it. And the way that the pony apparel thing happened for me ultimately is that for literally probably like 15 years while I was dreaming, I was in thrift stores hunting for special pieces of clothing. Like that was my happy place at night when I slept. And I also have a couple reoccurring chronic nightmares. And so it was never the nightmare vibe. It was always like the safe space. It was like happy bliss, joy.
Mm.
And in my waking life, I really like clothes. I really like vintage. You know, it's there too. But it was the action of this thing that I just would do all the time, every night of my sleeping almost. And
Wow.
so it kind of just like got to the place where I'm like, all right, like I hear you. Like there's something here for me, you know, and I listen to my dreams. And so I started the clothing. I started doing like sourcing and finding special, unique pieces that called to me. And I got into this small business collective incubator for basically to like trial run if you would want to have a brick and mortar. It was a collective of maybe like 7 or 8 small businesses all sharing the space. That just ended. It's ending right now, actually. I'm having my big last week sale right now. And I learned that I don't want to have a brick and mortar, that I'm not a public facing type of person. I like to be behind the scenes and creating, like that's my sweet spot. And the public facing thing for me is a more like few and far between, like the more minimal part of my lifestyle. And so I learned all of that in this process, but I also learned that like I love like putting a person in clothes that lights them up and gives them access to new parts of themselves. Like it's so fun and it's so amazing to witness that, because that's been my experience with wardrobe. Like I had a huge, really hard grappling of like, is this shallow? Am I doing shallow work? Like, you know, like look at this work I've been doing all these years. It's super depth based and it's very internal. And then here I am like wanting to like treat people like my human dolls, you know, like, can I put these clothes on you and make you look so pretty? It's so fun, you know? And there is something about my inner child that loves that and gets super excited about that. But it's deeper than that, is what I'm trying to say. And that's my experience of it with myself. Like when I feel like my clothing represents who I am, I feel so much more capable to go do the world. And who I am is constantly changing and shifting and evolving. And so my wardrobe is just like always needing refinement and updates. It's like this like crazy thing. And so ultimately what I see is being able to have some kind of space and some kind of service where we're doing both. We're doing the inner work, we're doing the transformation work, and then we're doing the wardrobe upgrades to match what just happened. And I don't know how that's all going to come together at some point, but that is the vision that I'm holding.
Well, thank you for giving us a little preview of
Yeah.
that. Perhaps if anybody listening is lit up by that idea, you could share that feedback so Hallie knows that this is something that wants to happen. And I really relate to that question of like, oh, is this shallow? Is it just like my, but it's like on the other hand, like what's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong with
Yeah.
really enjoying, clothes and dressing people up and like being in that world and at the same time, I totally get it. Like you and I are people who don't do shallow. And so it's like it was going to find its way to the deep end. It just, it's just gonna naturally get there.
Yeah.
But I love that you're allowing yourself to kind of be in the playfulness of it in the meantime and to
Yeah.
literally bring that like dream space into being in the world. That's really powerful.
One of my best friend in the whole world, she lives in Tucson, and so I've been speaking to her about this idea of like there is a spiritual component about clothes. There is something that happens when you feel like you got the upgrade that you needed. There's a transformation element there for real, for sure. And so we've been talking about this, and then she had a miscarriage like a week ago, and I just like sent her like 3 pieces of clothing, and she FaceTimed me, and I sent her husband a shirt too. And she FaceTimed me when she got the clothes, and she was just like so lit up and so illuminated. And she was just like, in this moment, I am feeling what you're talking about with the spiritual element of clothes. Like this couldn't have come at a better moment, and I like I needed this so bad. And I'm like, okay, cool, we're on to something. Yeah.
It's regalia, it's like taking on the external, um, manifestation of something that's happening in the unseen and like being it, embodying it. And clothing is such an important part of how we as humans embody things, right? Like putting it on our body and going and walking through the world with it. I've had an interesting conversation the other day with my roommate about the difference between costume and regalia and how, when we're talking about ceremony and we're talking about cultural practice and spiritual practice, we really need to think in terms of regalia of like, what is the clothing that is absolutely serious, even if it's ridiculous looking, right? Like he does a lot of clown work, like spiritual clown work, right? So sometimes his regalia is like ridiculous, but it's like, it's not a costume in that moment, right? It is taking on the spirit of something. And then he had some interesting pushback on like, yeah, but I'm a clown, like I costume, like it's part of what I do, so we had some semantics to work with there. But I'm just feeling that energy of, you know working with clothing as a way to bring to the surface, to the outside, whatever transformation has happened on the inside, as we do this incredibly important and simple and yet not easy work, with our own landscape,
Yeah.
landscape of our heart, of our soul, of our relationships. I love it. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
So there are multiple ways that folks can work with you. I love just the multifaceted nature, and my business coach was like, you got to pick one thing and you got to focus on that thing, and I'm like, but I can't though. And I did ultimately like really focus on Reiki for quite some time to really get those bones, and now I'm like, yeah, and also soul collage, and also this, and also that, and also that. And I love that you're just allowing like all of it to be present, and like the center of it, right? The heart of it is always coming back to the pillars, right? But the way in which one might engage is so diverse. We will of course put links to all of your stuff down below. But I just wanted to recap what I have heard, and then you can tell me if I'm missing anything. But folks can engage with this work by purchasing the book, The 7 Pillars of Love, which is a book and then also a workbook that people can use to work through them in their own life. There is some online work that they can do, kind of some self-paced stuff, and there will be coming soon a yearly membership, self-paced process that they can subscribe to. They can do one-on-one sessions with you that might include some oracle reading, it might include human design, some astrology, probably some beautiful alchemy of all of those things that allows a person to work on whatever it is that they are bringing to the table in that moment. They can purchase clothing from you online, perhaps, or in person if you're in the Sacramento area for one more weekend only. Um, and ultimately, they may be able to work with you in kind of bringing all of those things to bear into an experience arc that ultimately allows them to step out into the world fully adorned in the regalia of their true self that they have found through this work. Does that about cover it?
Yes, so good. Thank you so much. And I just will say, I know you're going to post links, but I write a lot on my Love School Instagram, so definitely follow me there. My pony apparel, pony underscore underscore two underscores apparel is my pony Instagram, which is going through a transformation right now as I'm transitioning from in person to online. My online pony store is under construction, being created as we speak. And then Seven Pillars of Liberated Love is on Amazon and accessible through my Love School website. And so is booking sessions with me is through my Love School website, which will be all linked.
Beautiful.
Oh,
And I'd love to close with one last question,
yeah.
which is in any realm of your life, in any way you want to focus, big or small, what's one thing that is bringing you joy these days?
Mm. One thing that is bringing me a lot of joy, like a lot of joy, it's two practices that I've been trying to commit to as much as possible. I'm not perfect at it, and I have a lot of permission to not be perfect at it, as we've been talking about, but as much as possible, I'm trying to do 2 laps around Curtis Park a day. So a 2 mile nice walk, and then a living room yin yoga practice at night. And those two practices have been the most like mood elevating, mood stabilizing practices because I'm not like a high impact person. I'm like a gentle person, but if I'm not getting enough movement in my day and enough stretch in my body, like my energy really stagnates and I get super bummed out. And so yeah, it's nice to give myself permission to just be the gentle creature that I am and find the practices that really work for me.
Wow. Yeah, that really resonates.
Yeah.
See, I think what comes up for me in this moment, there's two directions. One is just collaborating with folks. I've gotten to do some really cool collaborating, which includes these interviews, and also some in-person collaborations that I've gotten to do, and I really am feeling motivated to initiate more of those. I cycle between like introvert, don't talk to me, and then like, yeah, we gotta do it together, DIT. And pomegranates. Pomegranates are bringing me joy. It is in full effect. My tree is just bursting with them. I'm like, I have a whole vat of them to process later today. They are in their glory, their beautiful jewel-like umami glory in this time of the season, and that brings me joy.
Wow, that's a very joyful thing.
Yep, it's good stuff. All right, Hallie, thanks so much for stepping
Thank
into this
you. I
piece.
I see why you needed to start a podcast. Like this is definitely a zone of genius for you. So thank you
Oh,
for including me. I
so
really
much. Yeah.
appreciate
I look forward to it transitioning to a proper podcast. Right now, we live on YouTube. If anyone out there has skills in transforming a bunch of YouTube videos into a proper podcast, hit me up. I could definitely use some support in that. But I do love it. I've been looking forward to this conversation in particular for a very long time. And I'm so glad we got to sit down today on this glorious fall day and get to really dig into these places of connection. Again, it's been many years of our paths kind of paralleling each other and us, stepping into this work, figuring out what we're up to in the world, putting the bones in place, building the container, bringing it to a place where we can offer it out into the world. And it just feels so like both tender and strong and resilient for us to like stand shoulder to shoulder here and say like, world, we got some seriously good shit to bring to you.
it.
So,
Yeah,
step in here with us. It's good. It's a good place to be. Yeah.
I feel that.
All
Thank you.
right, friends. Thank you so much for watching today. Please do connect with Hallie in whatever way resonates with you. Please share your experiences with anything that came up for you when we discussed the 7 pillars of liberated love. How do they land for you? What's alive in your life for that? Please share your questions and reflections down below and join us next time on Reiki Crossroads and Connections. As you go throughout your day, may you be deeply provisioned for all the love that you deserve and that you have to bring into the world. Thanks so
Mm.
much for listening. We love you. Goodbye.
Mwah. Bye.